Okay, today we are practicing again matching the features of a quadratic. So we are going to work through matching the three parts of the equation with the points on the graph as we did on Friday. And we will take up C, noticing the key features, because there's going to be a quiz at the end of the period. And I will only give you parts of the information, and you will have to match them up and fill out the rest. Okay, so parts of the information is given. Alright, so this is practice in the Kaboom booklet. You're going to do examples D to F. For your homework, you're going to make sure that all the examples A to F are fully complete. So a little review. On Friday then we looked at the example A, and we noticed that the standard form gave us the information of 35, and 35 happens to be the y-intercept. And we also looked at factored form. We noticed that factored form gave us 7, and looking down below we see 7 is a root or a 0. So what we're seeing then in factored form is we have the 0 for the first and the second one. So actually 7 is my second root, and x plus 1 gives me a root of -1. That's my first root. Lastly, we looked at the vertex form, and the vertex form of course gave us our vertex being 3 and 80. So the value that's in the bracket is switched, the value outside of the bracket is not switched. So you'll have more highlighters, and you can go through and highlight again with the appropriate values once they're all constructed on your table. What we also need to point out is that y-intercept has the coordinates 0, 35. So if I looked in the table and filled this out with, let's say, the vertex form, y equals -5 times x minus 3 squared plus 80, and I filled in x as 0, then I would have -5 times -3 squared, add 80, and that turns out to be 35. So in other words, when you are looking at an x value of 0, you're going to get the y-intercept, which matches with the last part of the standard form. Summarizing then, we looked at standard form, and we noticed that standard form tells us, this is the green highlighter, the y-intercept and the step pattern, and we'll look into step pattern tomorrow. We noticed it looks like that it has no brackets, and that it is in fact x squared as a term. Factored form, we noticed, you can tell it has 2 sets of brackets, and then we had this weird example, the one up above, I think that's example C, and there's only one set of brackets, but we could read it as the bracket x minus 0. So then you have 2 sets of brackets. So maybe factored form is the hardest one, but we can then identify vertex form, and vertex form gives us the y-intercepts, but we notice the bracket is squared. So we can sort of look at standard form first, are there no brackets, then look for vertex form, are the brackets squared? If it's not either of those, perhaps we have 2 sets of brackets and we're looking at factored form. Alright, so example C. So I'm going to look, and I see here that the middle one has a bracket squared, so I'm going to call that one vertex form. And I see the end one is just an x squared term, so I know this one's standard form. And that leaves, of course, factored form, and when I double check, I do have 2 brackets, so that is factored form. Now, we should have the graph sketched from Desmos with the key points labeled, so I'm going to do that right now. Okay, so I have all of my graph labeled, and I have filled in the table down here, and I've filled in parts of this table. You should have it all filled out. And now I want to check the matching information. So for one thing, I know that the y-intercept can be found in the table when I have x equals 0, because a y-intercept happened when x equals 0. So I'm looking here that I have 15, so I could label on the graph or notice here that I have 15, and of course I notice in the standard form that I have 15. That also happens to be the initial height of the firework and labeled as the y-intercept of 15. What else can I notice? Well, I noticed that in factored form, I have the brackets x minus 3 and x plus 1. So that means my zeros are going to be the opposites of the values in the brackets. So the zeros are going to be 3 and negative 1, and I can check that on my graph, and indeed 3 and negative 1, or negative 1 comma 0, 3 comma 0 are my zeros. So when the question is, when does the firework land, it has to be the second zero. I also can notice from the table of values on the right here that the values when x is negative 1 and when x is 3 gives me the zeros. So those are the matching I see there. Also, I can notice that I have the vertex form. So the vertex form has the value x minus 1 squared plus 20. So my vertex should be switching the value in the bracket 1. The value outside the bracket stays the same, 1 comma 20. And indeed, when I look at the vertex that I found, it is 1 comma 20. That also means if I look at the table for the value 1, that I should have the output here to be 20. Finally, the maximum height turns out to be 20, and that's happening at a time of 1 second. So those two pieces are part of my vertex. So I've moved between all the pieces of information matching, and that's what you need to be able to do. So your formative assessment then, I'm giving you partial table, partial equation. You have to figure out what does this match with. You can sketch the parabola. You don't need to use Desmos. You can use Desmos to check, but I'm hoping that the information that you show me from these two pages matches in fact what you've come up with in terms of your equations. And we'll take that up tomorrow. So again, recall that you need to have the rest of the examples finished off as your homework, making sure they're complete with the graph, the tables, the matches, the labels of the forms, and the differences. So first and second. Good luck.